Hello everyone. Today we are starting chapter 10 on monopoly. So far we have studied perfect competition where firms are price takers. Now we move to the opposite extreme case, a market with only one firm. This chapter is important because many real world industries like electricity, water, or even some digital platforms actually do not behave competitively. So here is some objectives of this chapter. So after completion of this chapter, you should be able to list the characteristics of monopoly. We have already seen some kind of characteristics during the perfect competitive model. Uh, Another objective here is that after completion of this lecture, you should be able to explain the barriers to entry that shield monopolies from competition. Then explain how a monopolist sees the demand curve. And finally, explain how a monopolist sets its profit maximizing output and price. So keep this objective in mind as we go through the lectures. The basic introduction here is like a monopolist exists in markets where a single firm dominates. There are no close substitute of products and entry is restricted by certain rules and regulations. Example includes public utilities and pharmaceutical companies with patented drugs. The important thing is to understand is a monopolist does not behave like a competitive firm. It has some forms of market power, considerable amount of control over the price, meaning it can influence the price by controlling the supply of the product. The definition we can go like this. A monopoly is defined as a market structure where a single firm produces a product with no close substitute. Here are some characteristics. Single seller. We will discuss a few characteristics of monopoly here. First of all is single seller. Only one firm supplies the market. That means there is no close substitute and consumers cannot easily switch to another product. If consumers do not buy from the monopolist, then they essentially go without it. So there are no close substitute here. Another characteristics of monopoly is the price maker. Monopolist controls supply and significantly influences the price, unlike firms in perfect competition that are price takers. So in case of monopoly, monopolist can set price indirectly by choosing the output or by controlling the output. The second one here is blocked entry. Other firms cannot enter easily. This is crucial because without entry barriers, monopoly would not last. So monopoly power depends heavily on entry restrictions. Final characteristics here for monopoly is non-price competition. Even though monopolists face no direct competitors, they may still engage in advertising, branding, and product differentiation. Why they do this kind of things? Because they still want to increase demand and strengthen consumer loyalty. So monopolist does not mean no competition at all. It means no direct rivals. Here are some examples of monopoly. You can think about the examples of public utility companies where natural gas, utility, water, this can be thought of as the monopoly examples. And here are some few examples of near monopoly. So these are some real world examples. For example, Intel, who is actually dominant in the processor industry, and Google's Android, which also dominates the operating system of the mobile phone. And most of the mobile phones, most of the smartphones are based on Android. Here are some examples regarding the Manitoba. So Manitoba Hydro, which is a government monopoly, this is completely government supported. Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries. MBBL controls the wholesale distribution of alcohol in Manitoba. You may find there are some stores who sell liquor or lotteries, but these all are controlled by Manitoba government. Winnipeg Transit. You can also think about the Winnipeg Transit. There is no close substitute of Winnipeg Transit here. Only Winnipeg Transit is the whole provider of public bus. Barriers to entry. Now we are moving some another features of monopoly, which is barriers to entry. This also tells us why monopolists exist. The key reason monopolists exist is barriers to entry in whole. The firms could freely enter, profits would attract competitors, and monopoly could disappear. So remember, strong barriers is for monopoly, no barriers is for perfect competition. So economies of scale can only be happen when a firm grow, or in another way we can say economies of scale occurs when large production leads to lower average cost. In some industries, one large firm can produce at lower cost than multiple small firms. This creates a natural monopoly. Look at this figure. What we can see, if single firm can produce 200 units of product with an average total cost of 10, but these 200 units of product also can be produced with 4 firms equally producing 50 units, but the average cost will go up from 10 to 20. So this is a feature which actually happens in case of economies of scale. I mean, monopoly can have some economies of scale which is not possible to produce with other companies like competitive one. Another thing here is to mention that regarding the network effects, product value increases as more people use it. For example, social media like Facebook, Instagram, or other YouTube video sharing websites like YouTube or other things. So new entrants struggle to attract users, favoring established networks. Here are some examples of legal barriers that actually works a strong barriers to entry in the monopoly market. Here are two things can be happened, like patents, exclusive rights for 20 years, giving inventors temporary monopolies, and licenses. The government limits entry, so that they can set certain rules and regulations to control the number of radio stations, number of liquor stores, number of other things. So this is completely regulated by the government. 4. Ownership of essential resources. If a firm controls essential inputs, others cannot compete. For example, like the natural reserves or player contracts. So this is natural reserves is for a certain land or certain province or certain country, and player contracts goes to certain um, teams or certain franchises. So these are the ownership of essential resources that need to compete with others. And finally, strategic barriers. There are some strategic barriers that can set the barriers to monopoly. So price cutting to discourage entry, exclusive contracts. These are the different things monopoly can use to work as a barrier to entry for the newcomers. So all these mechanisms help protect monopoly power. To discuss monopoly demand, we need to mention some assumptions here. First of all, economies of scale patents or resource ownership secure monopolist status. Secondly, government does not regulate the firm. And finally, the firm is single price monopolist. It charges the same price for all the units sold. So it only charges the single price. This simplify the model so we can focus on the core behavior. Here is the crucial difference between monopolist and the perfect competitive market. A monopolist is the entire market, or the monopolist is the industry. There is no difference between firm and industry in the case of monopoly. And demand curve is the market demand curve. So it actually faces the downward sloping demand curve. And marginal revenue is less than the price. To sell more output, the firm must lower the price. This leads to a critical concept: marginal revenue is less than the price. But why? Because when the firm lowers price, it gains revenue from selling one more unit, but it loses revenue on all previous units. That is why marginal revenue is less than the price in case of monopolist. But what we saw in the case of perfect competitive model, in case of perfect competitive model, marginal revenue was equal to price, as well as average revenue was equal to price. But in case of monopoly, we will shortly see in the case of graph as well as in tabular information how marginal revenue becomes less than the price. So here is a table. We can just see different column informations here. The first shows us the quantity of output. The second one shows us the price or average revenue. The third one shows us total revenue. Fourth column shows us marginal revenue, and other column representing different things. Finally, our column 8 shows us profit. Negative profit or positive profit. I mean, negative profit indicates the losses here. So we are also following the same kind of formula or same kind of decision rule that we saw in case of perfect competitive model. So we will look that output level as long as marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost. So which is occurring here. As you can see, when a firm extends its output, the fifth unit of output shows us marginal revenue 82, which is greater than the marginal cost. So 82 is greater than 70. If that firm would like to extend its output to 6th unit, the marginal revenue will be 62, but the cost, which is going to be 80 for this level of output. Therefore, that output level will not be producing, only the 5th unit of output will be produced according to the marginal revenue and marginal cost rule. And we are going to apply this for our analysis of monopolist as well. What we can see at this output level of 5th unit, the profit is maximum. This 140 level of profit is greater than any other output level. So this is the case of profit maximizing scenario of a monopolist. Definitely we are following the same kind of formulas to find the marginal revenue as well as the marginal cost. So thus everything remains same, only we are following different settings. Here to see how marginal revenue works, let's discuss this figure. A monopolist or any other imperfect competitor with a downward sloping demand curve such as D. So here D shows us the demand curve for a single monopolist, and if it wants to sell more output, it must lower the price. So to sell more output, like from 3 unit to 4 unit of output, it must reduce the price from 142 to 132. So the gain is 132 for the next unit of output. I mean the fourth unit of output. But there is some associated loss like $10 per unit of output. So here that firm is reducing the price from 142 to 132. Therefore, per unit loss is $10. So $10 times 3 unit of output, that means loss is equal to 30. So the gain is 132 and the loss is 30. Now what we can see, the marginal revenue that is obtained as 132 was the price for fourth unit of output, but there is some associated loss of 30. Therefore, the marginal revenue of the fourth unit of output is 102, which is considerably less than its price. We can also locate other points of marginal revenue by extending the output from 4th unit to 5th unit, from 5th unit to 6th unit, and so on. You can rely on this table to find all this information about this marginal revenue. So following this column, you can see how marginal revenue is calculated according to this table. This figure is completely based on that table. So we should relate this figure with the table information. So yes, this is how MR works, or how we find the MR in case of in case of monopoly model. So here is some key information that we need to address here. Marginal revenue is less than the price. Monopolist is a price taker. Monopolist sets prices in the elastic region of the demand curve. We will see this thing shortly. They maximize profit by setting output where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. But in some cases, we will not be able to exactly equalize these two things. So we have to locate as long as marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost. We will locate that output level. So here is some graphical presentation regarding the demand curve, marginal revenue, and total revenue curve. So in the graph, demand curve is downward sloping and marginal revenue curve lies below it. Total revenue. In case of marginal revenue positive, when marginal revenue becomes positive, then total revenue increases. And when marginal revenue is zero, then total revenue is maximum. It reaches to its peak amount. And marginal revenue becomes negative, then total revenue decreases. These are the relationship. So what we can see, marginal revenue is positive in the elastic region of the demand curve. That's why we say that a monopoly will always set its price in the elastic region of the demand curve, which is here. Okay, so that's the thing. So a monopolist will set the price in the elastic region of the demand curve, not in the inelastic region. So these are the inelastic region. The monopolist will never set the price at this point. Now we want to see the profit maximizing scenario. Before going to see, we can think about the output and price determination case. What price quantity combination will a monopolist profit maximizing monopolist choose to operate at? So we need to think about the cost data, assume competitive factor markets, and MR is equal to MC rule. The firm will increase the output until MR is equal to MC, or we will locate the output level as long as MR is greater than MC. No monopoly supply curve. Recall, not a price taker, so a monopoly can control the price, therefore we don't need to think about any supply curve here. So there are some steps to find the maximizing scenario. First of all, we will equalize marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost here, which is occurring at the output level 50 units, and we need to extend this point upward up to the demand curve. Then what we can see, this is equal to 122. The price is equal to 122 as we extend this point here. So this becomes 122. Now we can also locate the cost or average total cost here by drawing here. So this gives us the average total cost, which is equal to 94. There are two ways we can calculate the profit level. We can just measure the area of this rectangle, or we can also calculate the total revenue and total cost, like the previous analysis of in the case of perfect competition. So this is similar. To calculate the profit level, we can just simply calculate the area of this by multiplying vertical distance and horizontal distance. I mean the formula of finding a rectangle. Or we can also calculate total revenue, total cost, and subtracting total cost from total revenue. That will give us the profit. So in this case, what we can see how a monopolist makes some profit. So one thing we need to mention here, according to the price determination, once quantity is chosen, I mean with the marginal revenue and marginal cost, when quantity is chosen here, we need to move vertically up to the demand curve to find the price. This gives the price the consumers are willing to pay based on their demand. And profit calculation, we mentioned that there are two ways that we can use to calculate the profit. So here is the step we can follow how we can find the profit maximizing case of the monopoly. You can take a look from here. So to summarize this lecture, we can say monopoly is a single seller, no close substitute. There is some entry barriers which is essential to become a monopoly. Demand is downward sloping, and not like the perfect competitive model. Here, in case of monopoly, marginal revenue is less than the price, which is also different from the case of perfect competition. And profit maximizing rule is same, like a marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, which is also the characteristics of the perfect competitive model. And another thing is that there is no supply curve for the case of monopolist. So that's all for this lecture. We provided a brief lecture on this chapter compared to the textbook. In your textbook, you will find other things which is associated here. We are just considering the selective topics of this chapter here. Thank you very much.